Welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Conrad Weaver. I'm so glad you're here today. So, how can first responder leaders put a wellness plan into place? Well, today I'm excited to bring you a conversation with a leader whose experience spans nearly 4 decades in law enforcement and now focuses on helping first responders get better. My guest is retired police chief Maggie DeBoard. She spent 26 years in a large agency and 13 years leading a medium-sized agency. She's the former president of the Virginia Chiefs of Police and now the founder of the Foundation for First Responder Wellness and Resiliency. We're going to talk about how wellness is evolving in law enforcement and the difference between checking a box and truly embedding a culture of wellness. And we'll talk about what leaders can do to ensure that first responders don't fall through the cracks. I really like her no-nonsense attitude toward leading wellness from the front. This is such an important topic, and I'm so glad you tuned in. Here's my conversation with Chief Maggie DeBoard. Well, Maggie, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the program today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So tell our audience a little bit about you, what's your background, and what brings you to the microphone today.
So I spent 38 years in law enforcement. I retired just this past March as a police chief in a local jurisdiction. I spent about 26 of my first years in a very large agency, and then the last 13 in a mid-sized, smaller agency. I served on the board for the Virginia Chiefs of Police as their president, so I did a lot of work around the state and with the legislator. And now, in my retirement, I'm focusing on first responder wellness. I have a foundation, and the First Responder, the Foundation for First Responder Wellness and Resiliency, and we hope to really make a difference down the road in making sure first responders have the resources they need to get the help they need.
So, how have you seen the conversation around wellness specifically evolve in your time as in law enforcement?
It's interesting because it's getting a lot more attention right now. It's very clear that people have an understanding of the need, but a lot of what I'm seeing is there are a lot of different approaches to wellness, and right now, there's really, in my opinion, 3 different kinds of leaders out there in the first responder world when you look at wellness. And we still have a large number of leaders on both the police and fire side, even in the dispatch side, that look at wellness as an unnecessary thing. And kind of old school, I did it, I sucked it up, I can take it. And they're not really doing anything to support their first responders who are, they're humans, they're struggling, they're exposed to really violent, ugly stuff. And then you have those who are saying, I'll accept the wellness, we'll get some programs in place, we'll do this, we'll do that. And they're checking a box, but they're really not engaged. And when you're not engaged, your troops know you're not engaged. And that's really critical, right?
Right.
And then you got some great leaders out there who are not only advocating, every day to take care of their officers and their firefighters and their dispatchers, but they're participating, they're leading, they're talking about it, and they're changing the culture within their agencies.
Do you
Those
think
folks are making a difference.
Do you think that first person you described, do you think perhaps part of their reason for just their lack of caring is because they're dealing with their own stuff and they don't want to really address that?
I'm sure that's involved with many people. I mean, some of them don't do it because they don't have the money to do it. Some of them don't do it because they just don't want to fight for it. But there are many, especially first responders, that have been in this job for a long time, whether you're police chief or not. I had my struggles as a police chief. So everybody's dealing with that. And if they are having their own struggles and never got help, they're not likely going to help others that are working under them.
Do you think part of the issue in the first responder space, and I was talking to some people this past weekend up in the Boston area about how leaders get promoted, and it's basically take a test, pass the test, you're going to get your promotion. It's not really based on merit in any way. Do you think that has something to do with getting people in leadership that really aren't prepared for that position?
I think that's part of it. I think some of it is also very much political. And, I have to be honest with that. Many heads of agencies are chosen for political reasons, That does not make them the best leader for the agency. And, when you look at wellness, Conrad, I look at it this way. Wellness is not, I call it a bright light issue. Wellness is not a bright light issue. It's not going to get me as a chief out in the public in front of a podium talking about how I saved the troop today. I got them help. I saved their career. They were on the brink of maybe committing suicide. And it's not a bright line issue. It's very private. It's very painful. It's very personal. And when those things happen, there's a lot of chiefs that aren't looking for that. They're not looking for those small wins within their agency. They're looking for those bright light issues. And that's where priorities oftentimes get pushed aside. So oftentimes when agencies make political choices, they may not have the priorities in line for both their troops and the community. I mean, as a police chief, for me, there was only two things that really mattered for me. One was the community mission, right? I got to keep the community safe. That always had to be number one. Number two was taking care of my troops. Always take, because if the troops are taken care of, they're going to be better for your community. There's no question about that.
And they'll do for you, even if they don't feel like it. They're going to work for you and do all the things necessary to accomplish the mission, right?
Right, they are. And they see how you handle personnel issues within your agency. You may not be talking about them, but if they see that, you didn't put the time into this officer or this firefighter and you just let them resign, you didn't provide the support and help and they ended up, separating for some reason and they feel that you didn't do enough, that gets spread throughout the agency. Then that's what builds the distrust. That's also what creates the stigma and the failure to disclose when they're struggling. And then that can come out in really inopportune times, whether it's an engagement with the community or they get to the brink where they're actually thinking about taking their life.
If you have people who are going through their career and they don't feel supported, they're always going to be looking for that other opportunity to jump ship, to go to a place where they are supported, right? Have you seen that in your career?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. And in my last agency, we built a very, very good wellness program for a smaller mid-sized agency. Didn't cost a lot of money, but it took a lot of time and investment to do that. And the officers appreciate that. And, it's interesting when we look at, is your program successful or not? I had one of my commanders who's in charge of the peer support piece of that and came to me and talked about, our peer contacts literally doubled the first couple years that we actually put this whole program in place. And I had another commander say to me, that's not good. We've got people struggling. I said, no, these are people that always needed help. They trust the system now and they're coming forward. That, to me, that's a huge sign of success. It was working behind the scenes without ever becoming a crisis or performance problem to my attention. And that's the best of both worlds right there.
I mean, wouldn't you rather have people getting help than going to work every day, needing the help and being unhealthy and making poor choices?
Absolutely. Although I retired at the top, I know what it's like. I remember very distinctly what it's like coming to work, having to go out and interact with the community and handle calls when I was struggling at home and, just having those bad days. And, back then when I came through, I think I started my career in 1986. You didn't talk about wellness. You didn't talk about, I don't feel mentally good today. You didn't dare do that. And there were no resources for you to go to if that was the case.
So, a question that you, or a statement that you made in some of the work that you sent me, you said some things can't be delegated from the top. Can you explain what you meant by that? Yeah,
so I truly believe that as a chief, and a lot of folks might believe that chiefs shouldn't get down in the weeds. And I do believe that to a point. You have people that have to carry out the details of programs and policies within your agency. But what's most important is wellness is a culture. Wellness, that has to be prevalent throughout your entire organization. And when I say you can't delegate things, wellness is one of them. You can't delegate a priority on wellness. You have to make it clear to your organization that you believe in wellness, that you expect certain things to happen, that this is how you're going to carry out wellness in your agency, that you're going to support and do all those things. And you can't delegate that to commanders to do. You have to take the lead on that. And then you delegate pieces of that program, different pieces, to commanders or supervisors that are motivated, that have empathy and understanding, and that know how to carry that program out. But you can't delegate the lead part of that, because when the troops don't see you taking the lead for something that important, they're not going to buy into it.
Mm-hmm. You know, it reminds me of the book that I think it was a former Navy SEAL wrote, Jocko, talked about extreme ownership.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
have that book. It's awesome.
yeah, owning that piece. You know, you as a leader have to own it first.
You do. And you can't fake that.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't fake that. And when we instituted certain things in my old agency, one of the things we had instituted was everybody goes through annual wellness checks with a clinician, whether you need it or not. It's a check-in, you know, an hour-long check-in. We were the first group. Myself and our commanders were the first group to go through. First year we did that. Mm-hmm. So you know, you shouldn't be exempt from any of that.
I think here in Maryland, it's now a law that all officers have to go through a wellness check. And I've heard through the grapevine that some places it's more of that check the box type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so how can you get troops to buy into that, to take it seriously, aside from just being something that you check the box on?
Well, there are ways to approach that without just shoving it down their throats. And when we instituted wellness checks, annual wellness checks, the first thing we did was set up training for everyone. So we did, you know, roll call training, and we introduced the clinician to the officers and to the civilians, because our dispatchers and our civilians went through it too. We introduced a clinician, and the clinician talked about what her role was and what would happen during these checks, and the differences between what they did and what peer support did. So the officers understood there was different roles for each position, and made it very easy for them. They could sit there. They could actually do it on duty through their phone, sitting in their cruiser, you know, checking out, or they could do it from home. But they made it really easy to do through their phone. And even the clinician would tell the officers, if you don't want to tell me anything, that's fine. I'll sit there and talk to you for an hour and just talk about how to take care of yourself. And so when the first group went through, there was a lot of hesitation, of course. Mm-hmm. And then it quickly spread down the hallway. Hey, this was really good. And I'm looking forward to my next one. And it spread through the hallways that it was a very, very good experience. So we set it up for success the right way, instead of just saying you need to go. And after that, what happened as a part of that, we did have certain employees that needed follow-up for things. And they were able to schedule directly with that clinician without going through supervision to do that.
And you as a chief went through that checkup too, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, when we talk about leadership, I don't think the troops understand how much stress that leadership is under. Mm-hmm. And we often don't have an outlet to go to. Like I can't sit there and I don't have a peer necessarily to talk to like the officers do or the supervisors do. And in many respects, I think our leadership needs support just as much in every level, and they're not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not getting it.
Leadership is a lonely position. You know?
It's an extremely lonely position. Yes, it is.
Did you have other chiefs from other agencies that you kind of were in partnership with or in connection with to kind of check up on each other?
I wouldn't say that necessarily, but I had people, you know, that were at my peer or at a level outside of the agency that I could confide in, that I could talk to. I did have direct access to a clinician as well. But I also had, you know, peers, you know, in and out of outside of my agency that it was very easy to go to. But you have to have somebody. We in Virginia, we've been talking about kind of a peer support team for the executive level throughout the state. And I know the Virginia Chiefs are working on a program to try to set that up. But when you get all the chiefs in a room together, they don't want to talk about it. It's very interesting. I know the vice president of my foundation actually addressed the Virginia Chiefs in August at their annual conference and talked about some of the things that we were doing and the need for that. And it was interesting. There's just not a lot of engagement. I think people think, oh, we got a program. We've checked the box. It'll just go. But until you become under extreme stress, you don't realize how badly you need it.
Do you think that's kind of the problem, that we have a program we don't have it in the culture. It's just a program that sits
Right.
over here.
It has to be part of it, which means talking about it. And it means incorporating wellness in almost everything that you do. So for example, if you have a critical incident, let's say you have a police shooting or you have a very difficult crime scene, part of that debriefing should be talking about wellness. Okay, who needs follow-up here? Not just how did we handle this operationally, but who needs wellness? How do we get that to these folks? Where do we make referrals? What paperwork needs to be done for workers' comp? Every part of what you do should have a wellness component to it. Do we need to take somebody offline for a couple of days, whether they want to or not? We started doing that just to give people a chance to decompress, whether they needed clinical care or not. But a lot of times they just needed, that chance to decompress.
Mm-hmm. So, what should leadership be focused on?
Leadership should be focused on the very first thing should be, what does my organizational culture look like? That's the most important. So let's say you talk about wellness and you're thinking, all right, I'm going to put this program in place. Well, what if your culture is set up where the officers, firefighters, whoever, the dispatchers, they don't trust your leadership? If they don't trust leadership for whatever reason, it doesn't matter what type of program you put in place. And that starts with leaders. How do you interact with your people? How do you communicate with your folks? Do you treat them with respect and professionalism? Are you present when they need you the most, whether it's at a critical scene or whether somebody's struggling? Do you interact? So you have to create a culture that supports them across the board, obviously doing the job that you need to do. And it starts with how people treat their employees. And we have a lot of leaders in place that are really running toxic organizations because they don't put the time in. They put the time into themselves and how the public views them, but they're not putting the time in to their agency. And I'll tell you, we focus all the time. What's the big word out there, at least in the policing world, is community policing. How do you interact with the public? Have we ever really stepped back and looked, how do we interact with each other inside the building? That is one of the most toxic environments there is. And in the first survey that was done, that my foundation actually grew from, did a national survey, the largest stress for employees was reported to come from within. Not from handling a mass shooting, it was coming from within.
Right. That coincides with what the FOP has done as well in their surveys.
Absolutely.
The number one, number two, stressors are within.
You can't just change the culture immediately.
Sure.
It's 3 to 5 years technically to really ingrain and change an organizational culture that will last beyond your leadership is really how they look at it. And we started that in my last agency. We started that. We did a culture survey. We found out what they didn't like, what they did like. We looked at what can we implement, what can we change, and you start making those incremental changes. And wellness is always a part of that. It just has to be a part of that.
And how can a chief who's often in the police world, police chiefs are often serving at the pleasure of the mayor or the city council or the city manager. How can you balance what they want with what you need for your people who work for you?
That's a little tougher because you have to get your money and your resources from the politicians who run your jurisdiction. So you have to demonstrate the need. And when we got the results of the last survey, the national survey that we did, I had those in my hand, and that was around the George Floyd reform era that came out. And my jurisdiction was pretty much immune from the riots, and there were no real issues there. There was obviously the community feelings and social media and stuff, but I took that to my boss and I said, look at this. Look how bad police look in this survey. And I said, my folks are part of this. They're not immune from this. And they're feeling the same things that we're feeling. And the results were bad enough. I mean, suicide ideation was like 8%. And we're like, I might have troops that are in this survey like that. So I said, hey, I need money for wellness checks. So you have to learn to balance what's more important to you. We were due to get so many cars. I said, what if you take one car out of my budget and give me wellness checks for a year instead? I can live without one extra new car. I don't need it, but I need wellness checks. And that started our annual budget for wellness checks. Mm-hmm. So there's a way to find that. And there's also a way to implement wellness outside of the clinical piece without money. Mm-hmm. You need money for clinicians, clearly.
Sure.
But there's other things you can do that don't cost money.
Mm-hmm. So how can perhaps people within an agency that have a chief or have a leader who's not on board with this, how can they lead up and help implement change in this area?
Yeah, that's a little tougher thing. I say never stop trying. And, as a lower level leader in their agency, they can start looking at what other agencies are doing. They can say, hey, agency B over here has this great program and the troops really like it and it's making a difference. And they can approach their command structure and say, hey, can we start doing some of these things? They don't cost money. They cost a little bit of time. But time is there's always time to do certain things. And you just have to find the right people that are motivated and, more importantly, that the troops trust. If you put somebody in charge of a wellness program, or you give somebody, let's say, command of a peer support team or any part of your wellness program, and the troops don't trust them, you're dead in the water. You're just dead in the water. But there's always a way to keep building, because the one thing that we all know is leaders rotate. Top leaders don't stay in agencies. I was in mine for 13 years. That's a long time as a police chief, right? Mm-hmm. Most don't stay that long. Most don't stay that long as fire chiefs. And there are ways to hopefully open their eyes to the need. That's the first part of it. And if they don't, to still make incremental differences at the lower levels, they can still provide the support that their troops need.
Hmm. So what were the results in your agency when you started implementing some of these things, the wellness for your troops? What did you see happen within your department? Was there more joy in the department? Was there more people staying, not getting sick or not calling out? What were some of those results?
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring that one point up. I talked about the peer context, how they went up quite a bit. And that I looked at that as a positive, not a negative. But our sick leave did go down the first year, 16%. Wow. It was pretty amazing. And that's a big jump. And we didn't have people calling out as much. But we also had people calling in and talking to their supervisor and say, look, I'm having issues today. Can you find somebody, to fill in for me? But they were able to have those conversations instead of coming to work and struggling. Mm-hmm. We talked about, we put in my agency, we had put in a sleep room, basically a place where they could come in and take a 30-minute nap. And, when you're working the night shift and you didn't get enough sleep because you're up with your kids all day, mm-hmm. do we want them out there falling asleep in their cruiser, especially mm-hmm. with the ambushes and things that are going on now with law enforcement? No, mm-hmm. we want them to come in and say, I just need to close my eyes for 30 minutes in a safe place. So not all of them buy into that, but the ones that do will use those resources that you provide for them. So sick leave was a big one. Peer contacts was a big one. We did see communication within the building much, much better. And that was a big deal because, again, how we treat each other, we put together kind of a contract, a template of how we wanted to treat each other in the building. And we talked about what are the 10 behaviors that we won't tolerate with each other in the building and the 10 things that we actually support. And we tried to live by those every day. Now, we're human. We didn't always do and say the right things, of course, but we'd always point back to that and say, hey, we need to get better. We talked about not doing this. And it started to make a big difference in that building.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any, do you have any numbers on how it affected use of force?
Our use of force was so low in our jurisdiction, my last jurisdiction was a small, very urban, but a very small jurisdiction, but very, very low use of forces. We had, I think the last year, the 2024, I think we had 0 citizen complaints, completely across the board. We just didn't have them. And we spent a lot of time with officers reviewing body camera footage when we saw things that we didn't like. So we tried to be very proactive on that side so that we didn't have those things coming down the road.
Mm-hmm. So as a leader, what did you do for those new recruits coming in?
One of the first things that we talked about, so everyone who goes through our recruiting process, the last step is actually sitting in front of me. Now, large jurisdictions can't do that. Obviously, with your head of your agency, there's too many people. My agency, I could do that. So they sat with me for a good hour. And one of the first things I talk about was officer safety and wellness. And my goal was always to get them to retirement in a happy, healthy place. That's always my goal. And we were going to hold them responsible for being part of that program, which means also reporting if a fellow officer is struggling. We wanted them to report that to somebody trusted so that could be dealt with. That was one of the first discussions we ever had. One of the things that I'd like to caution leadership about, and we talked about getting these programs just to check the box. When you do bring programs into your agency, whether it's clinician or clinical care program or different parts of a wellness program, you should be checking on it to see what's going on. Is it having an effect? Is it being run properly? Is it are the troops using it? If they're not using it, there's a disconnect somewhere, right? But there are a lot of, and I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but there are a lot of people out there selling wellness for first responders. And there is no one solution to wellness. There's not. And if your department wants an app, great. If an app's helpful and your officers use it, by all means, find a good app. But that's not a wellness program. That's a tool for your wellness program. And there's so many people, selling it as this is what you need. Well, there is no one solution to wellness. You have to be able to develop a multitude of resources and tools because not everybody relates to the same things. Some of the younger generation like the apps, the older folks won't use them. The biggest, most important piece is getting access to clinical care when they need it and having access to peer support always. Those are the two biggest pieces that I would start with. The other tools you can add here and there as maybe money or resources are available.
That kind of speaks to the question that just floated through my head. So if you have an agency, a leader who's part of an agency, leading an agency who doesn't have anything in place, what's the first step that they should do?
They should reach out to an agency that has been successful. I would reach out to multiple agencies. They can contact us at the foundation as well. We can point them to agencies and show the different ways that agencies are doing wellness. And there is no one exact template for any agency. The larger agencies tend to have the most money to put into those types of things, but money doesn't make a good wellness program. Again, we talk about culture and leadership in that piece, but they can develop resources very easily, right? But there's also a way for smaller agencies to work together collaboratively to develop shared resources. So the expense is not with one agency, but they can contact us at the foundation. They can contact other agencies and say, show me what your wellness looks like. Get examples from everywhere that you think is relevant and look and say, what can we do now? And where do we want to go and what can we afford? And once you start putting pieces in place and you can show that it's making a difference anywhere and the number of use of force incidents you have and the complaints and your sick leave, any of that stuff, then you can approach your boss, your politicians and say, look, we're making a difference. And if I can keep this low and wellness is helping, I need funding to continue this. Part of that too, Conrad, is really getting the politicians at the higher level. So in Virginia, one of the roles that I had with the Virginia police chiefs, especially as their president, was advocating for workers' compensation for PTSD, for anxiety and depression. And we initially couldn't get them to do it. It took years to get the PTSD bill passed. So we do have legislation in Virginia. Many states don't have that, where if you are exposed to a critical incident, you can get workers' comp, which means you'll get access to a clinician for PTSD. We tried very hard for a couple years to get anxiety and depression added to that bill, and they didn't want to add it. And we tried to convince them, look, if you can treat anxiety and depression, you may never get to PTSD. We're trying to avoid getting there. And if I break a leg, okay, I'm running down the street chasing somebody, I break a leg, there's no question they're going to treat me, right? If I go in a child death and I'm traumatized by that, they don't look at that the same as a physical injury. And it's a brain injury. It needs treatment. It's traumatic. And for some people, it's extremely traumatic. So we had to get them to understand that a brain injury is very similar to a physical injury. And I don't know a cop or a firefighter really that would ever want to go out on disability for mental issues or PTSD. I don't know anybody that wants to do that. So our goal is give us the ability to treat it. Again, work related, not I got demoted or I didn't get my promotion, qualifying events that are listed in our code, and let us get the treatment so that we can continue to serve in a very effective and safe way. And we actually accomplished that years ago.
Do you think there's a fear of abuse of the system because you can't see this injury physically?
You can't see it. Yeah,
do you think so? Do you think that there's a fear that someone's going to just take advantage of that?
There's always a fear of that. But that's what I try to explain to them. If you can't see an injury, it's more dangerous to the agency. It's a bigger liability to the agency. And you don't know when or how it's going to rear its ugly head. It could be worst case scenario, you have a troop that's going to take their life. Worst case scenario. Or you might have another really bad scenario for the jurisdiction where they get involved in a very bad shooting or use of force incident. And maybe there's something going on there that could have triggered that, or they shut down and they don't perform. That's a liability. When you can't see an injury and it's not being treated, to me, that's a much higher liability. I had to stand on the floor of the General Assembly and hold up, take the results of our survey and hold them up and said, you can't ignore this. You can't ignore these numbers. They're devastating. And the one thing that we were not able to accomplish in Virginia that we are still trying very, very hard to do is get our dispatchers, our telecommunicators, added to our workers' comp bill. They're not treated the same as first responders. And when you look at any of the survey results from any survey that's been done, including the one that we did before and the one hopefully that will show the same results now, our dispatchers were worse than both police and fire. Both police and fire. They don't get the support that they need. In many places now, they're separate from those agencies. They used to be part of the agencies, and in many places, they're their own agency. They're completely separate.
Wow. Is there anything that you, in your time as a leader, that you wish you would have done sooner or better in your leadership?
Yeah, for sure. When I was a younger supervisor, younger troop, I was always focused on not how I can get to the next level, but how can I be the best that I can be here? I always took care of my troops, but I never looked at that younger level. I never looked, what do they really need, right? They need me to support them when I go out on a call. They need this, but more of that, what can I do to help them when they're not here? And that means that struggle piece, not understanding how bad that struggle is. I needed to be educated. I wish I had been educated much younger in my career about the effect of trauma, the effect of exposure to trauma, how it impacts the brain, how it can manifest itself in performance issues, because that's a big key. You have an officer that comes in late every day all of a sudden, and you're like, what's going on here? That if that just starts happening, there's something else behind that. And too many times supervisors, commanders look at that, well, they're just sloughing off now. They're not doing their job. Well, that doesn't happen without a reason. It just doesn't. Or they get in trouble off duty, right? And are you looking at what the root cause of that is? No, we didn't used to do that. And if I had a better understanding about how trauma affects the brain, whether it's trauma at work or trauma from childhood or somewhere else, if it's affecting them at work too. I didn't understand that as a younger troop.
What's the one thing that you're grateful for that you did as a leader?
That I always, despite the political implications that I sometimes had to deal with, I always stood up for my troops when they did the right thing. I always advocated for their support and their wellness, and I always had their backs. And that cost me politically at times. There's no question about that. But I don't regret one day of that. And the troops need to know that you're not going to make political choices over them. And if you can't work in a jurisdiction that allows you to do that, it might not be the best place for you long term. But you have to find a place that allows you to do that. Of course, understanding that you still do have a line to walk, right? You do have bosses to report to, but you can't compromise the support and wellness of your troops for political reasons. You just can't do it.
Hmm. So tell us a little about your foundation and what you guys have going on in the near future.
Yeah, so our foundation, we started back in 2022, I guess it was. And we actually started after we got the results of that first survey that was done. There are a couple folks on my board now that were involved in putting that first survey together. Dr. Michael Bork, who is the head clinician for the U.S. Marshal Service, phenomenal individual, very, very smart, great researcher. And we got the results of that survey, and we were just dumbfounded how bad they were. So we talked about how we have to do things. So the goal of our organization, honestly, we have kind of three pillars. We want to be able to deliver at some point clinical care for our first responders from a nonprofit, non-governmental perspective. Because we know one thing, even if you have resources in your agency, some folks will never go to their own clinicians to get help. So we want a place that they don't have to, that is not tied to government to get help. The other piece is education and training, which we want to do nonstop. We are doing some of that now. And then, of course, a research edge. So what we're doing now with our research is we've launched another survey. I know the FOP did one. We're doing one too. We want to take the results of this survey and we want to put it back in the hands of every leader in this country and say, here are the results nationally in your category: police, fire, dispatch, corrections. Take these results, do something meaningful with them. Advocate at your General Assembly in the state. Go to your boss and advocate for resources, wherever you can get them. But we don't benefit from having results. We want to put them back in their hands. And we especially want to help with the dispatch community. One of the things that we're doing with this survey too is we are adding retirees on here. And nobody's looked at retirees.
That's an important population group, right?
Yeah, and they're struggling, I think, the most. We did a talk, myself and my co-founder, Jay Carson, did a talk in front of a retiree group about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. And there were probably about 150 people there. And we had multiple people walk up to us afterwards and say, I can't wait. I need help now. I'm struggling. I'm having, nightmares. I'm this and that. And we were saddened by that. So we had to reach out within our network and find some help. But we want to see where do we go wrong with retirees? What do retirees need now? But ultimately, we want to build a center, our first center in Northern Virginia, where folks can come and get help anonymously. They don't have to go through their agency, make it affordable through insurance and everything, and provide all the type of report, both for retirees and make it a holistic center. So, having service dogs there, having financial support there, having nutrition, spousal help, all the type of education and training that we need, peer support, everything. And unfortunately, I don't feel like government does it right a lot of the times. I think they mean well at times. I don't think they always do it right. And there's always going to be this distrust. And what I've also seen is even when government at times has great programs set up, sometimes they don't last through the leadership changes. And that's really painful to see when you have a great program and then leaders change and then the program becomes a shell of itself. So we want to provide some consistency and some support. So that's what we're doing now. I will say one thing, we tell people that are involved in this, cops and firefighters. I know firefighters are the same way. Cops are some of the worst. They complain all the time about the conditions and what it's like. And then we say, hey, we need you to sit down and take a 20-minute survey. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. Well, if you're not going to take the time to help us, we can't provide you the data to create meaningful change. And without data, you're not going to get the people that hold the money to listen to you. That's a fact. It's not going to happen. But this survey is evidence-based. It's got a lot of the tools that the VA uses embedded in it to diagnose PTSD, suicide ideation, alcohol. We're actually looking at drug use in here too. How many are using over-the-counter prescribed drugs such as antidepressants through the primary care to mask other problems? We're looking at that. But 20 minutes is not a lot of time to provide really meaningful data for us. So I encourage people to go to our website, foundationfrwr.org. You can go right to our news and information, take the survey there. You can get us on LinkedIn. We're going to run the survey for months ahead, but we really need participation. More importantly, I need leaders to to put that out there to their folks and encourage them to take it. It's the only way we're going to make meaningful changes, to provide the data that we need.
We'll be sure to put those links in the show notes so people can click on there
Appreciate
directly and
that.
get to your website and to the survey. So Maggie, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I think what you're doing is amazing, and you continue to be a voice for strong leadership within our first responder communities, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you being on the program today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing your leadership insights. Hey, if there's one thing we'll walk away with, it's this: wellness is not a sideline. It's not a check the box or a program. It must be embedded in the culture, in the leadership, and in the trust of how we treat each other every single day. So if you're a leader, remember this: you can't delegate ownership of wellness. You must lead it. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review so that more people in our community can hear it. And finally, please remember that you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.